welcome Professor Bhaskaran as our speaker today. And we'll talk about far from equilibrium superconductivity at room temperatures. Bhaskaran retired out of math science, and he's now associated with IIT Madras and the Perimeter Institute in Waterloo, which is not far from here. Bhaskaran has actually visited Buffalo at least once, visited us, and the year was 96. And we were just reminiscing about how much fun we had, not to mention the incredible talk he gave. I'll basically introduce him briefly and let him take over because I don't want to use up any of his valuable time. Bhaskaran is a theoretical physicist with a broad interest in quantum many-body physics, has explored a variety of novel superconductors, starting from cuprates, predicted the now elusive P-wave superconductivity in SR2RuO4, explores novel quantum phases and emergent particles. An emeritus professor at the Institute of Mathematical Sciences, Chennai, Bhaskaran is a distinguished professor at IIT Madras and a distinguished visiting research chair at the Perimeter Institute for Theoretical Physics in Waterloo, Canada. And everybody knows him for his extended collaboration with the late P.W. Anderson. And he started working with Anderson from 1984 until pretty much Anderson's entire life. So he has been working with him. And many of you are very familiar with his tremendous contributions to the field. So with that, let me hand you over to you, Bhaskaran. You want to share your screen?
Sure, Surjit.
There we go. Oh,
Okay.
fantastic. Yeah, let's
Wonderful, is it? Let me just check.
Okay.
Okay, let me just see if things move. Stuck.
Sometimes there is a delay.
Oh,
There you go.
yeah.
Okay.
So,
Just factor in a little bit of delay sometimes. It happens.
Yeah.
Okay.
so shall I start, Surjit?
Yeah, please do, and I'll mute myself and let us everybody mute ourselves. And if you have questions, you can just ask him.
Sure.
So let's keep it informal, just as we always have. Thanks.
So thank you very much, Surjit, for the kind invitation. It's a real great pleasure to be talking to you at long distances, friends, connected by electromagnetic radiation. Thanks to Mr. Maxwell, we are all united and we are fighting against this COVID, and we are managing to do our physics. Of course, poor people are suffering a lot. It's a very bad period, but we should not give up our physics, and it's very exciting. So today, and I once again thank Surjit and colleagues for inviting me to give this talk. And I fondly remember my last visit to Buffalo. I came from Princeton, and then it was peak winter. So I gave my talk and had interesting discussions with colleagues. Then I had a condition with Surjit that if he should drive me to Niagara. So we did do that. And Niagara was frozen with big icicles. It was a great sight. And I did take some photographs, but unfortunately it's in the infinite bath. It's hidden somewhere. I could not get it out. So it was a wonderful time. So I wish I could be there now, because as I was telling, Niagara is a great state, Finger Lakes, Niagara, New York. There are so many wonderful things. So thank you once again. So I will first acknowledge several collaborators I have heard over years in connection with collaborators, superconductivity, and the three institutes which are supporting me, Math Science, IIT Madras, and Perimeter Institute. And P.W. Anderson is a very special collaborator. I started collaborating with him from 1984. The photograph that you see was my last visit to Princeton, and the last day I met Phil Anderson. That happened to be his 95th birthday. So I alerted colleagues, so they prepared a nice cake, and we had a birthday party, and that's a picture. You see Duncan Haldane, and Ravin Bhatt, Elliot Lee, Shivaji Sondi, and Daniel Fisher, and several other friends. It was a wonderful time. So you won't believe that day I had 3 hours of fight and discussion with Anderson on a variety of topics, including superconductivity. And when we parted, he told me, Bhaskaran, you and I understand superconductivity very well. Why don't others understand us? And we laughed and we said goodbye. So that's Phil Anderson, amazing. He's so passionate about superconductivity and RBB theory. And the physics kept him very happy till his last breath. So he passed away a year ago. He was a great man, and I was very fortunate to have been associated with him. And physics as a field also is fortunate to have had giants like him. Okay. Then let me go back to my PhD days. Professor Narendra Kumar, many of you will know him, was my mentor. He gave a course on many-body theory and focusing on superconductivity, sometimes in November, December in 1970. And it was so inspiring, I started thinking about superconductivity, learning slowly, subtleties of BCS theory and so on. And it's in those days, my supervisor, Professor K.P. Sinha and Narendra Kumar, had written a paper just 2 years ago on possibility of photo-induced superconductivity in systems where they said even room temperature superconductivity could be reached. It was a very bold paper. And it's amazing that those kind of ideas are coming back now, and there are recent fascinating developments. And it was 50 years ago. And I had the good fortune of having my friends R.K. Shankar and Rajaram Nityananda, who joined me, and we learned many things there. So I thank Professor Narendra Kumar, who is no more. He was a great spirit and inspiring person. Now, Surjit, as I said, was my host, and of course he drove me to Niagara. Niagara was empty, but it was full of snow. And this is not the picture I took. It's thanks to Insider, which thanks to Surjit, I got this picture. It's beautiful because I remember spending several minutes watching these huge icicles. I was wondering what is inside. And the ice is an amazing thing. We'll come back to it. Now this is, yeah. So every conductor offers resistance when electrical current flows, but mercury doesn't. Sorry, there is some problem, and that's where there is a figure here which is not appearing of resistance versus temperature as measured by Kamerlingh-Mons. So around 2-3 degree Kelvin, the resistance dropped to 0. This was a famous discovery by Kamerlingh-Mons in 1911. It opened up a new chapter in condensed matter physics. And he always believed in experiments like most of us do. So apparently in his door, it's written from measurements to knowledge, which is a very important statement, because if you look at the progress of physics, it's always preceded by key measurements, starting from Maxwell's discovery or Planck's hypothesis. So it's an experimental driven field, and we are fortunate. We have many, many good experiments going on, and even more experiments going on and challenging us theories. Now, I want to point out the role of theory in condensed matter physics. It's kind of funny. Kamerlingh-Mons was inspired by a theory due to Lord Rayleigh. Lord Rayleigh, at that time, quantum mechanics was not there. Only thing that we knew was Rutherford's model of atom, that there is a positive charge nucleus, and then negative electrons are running around. So the hypothesis was, in a metal, these electrons are thermalized and they leave home and they're running around, and you see a metal, brewed a metal. So Lord Rayleigh's hypothesis was that if you cool the system sufficiently to low temperature, all the electrons should go home and stay put there, and you will have an insulator. So Kamerlingh-Mons wanted to prove Lord Rayleigh right. So he took the purest form of metal, which was mercury, because if it was liquid, you could purify it and pull it down. And lo and behold, he didn't see infinite resistance, but he saw zero resistance. So I always tell that, please listen to your theory friends. they will take you always to the right direction. They may be wrong with respect to sign, but there will be always rich physics. So that's my defending physicists. But there are many instances later in which a lot of enormous energy was put in by theories, and they guided people, and then you got superconductivity. Not for that reason, but what is important is to have some insights and drive. So superconductivity is a macroscopic quantum phenomena. It brings quantum mechanics, so to say, to tabletop. Resistance is quantized to 0. So mathematicians know what is 0, and we physicists know what is 0. Like, quantum conductance in the context of quantum Hall effect and so on. Angular momentum of supercurrent is quantized, that's flux quantization. Quantum interference of macroscopic currents, Josephson effect. Majorana fermions for topological quantum computation, Josephson qubits, adiabatic quantum computation. So superconductivity offers great platform for future technology, and already it's being used in several places. So it's a great phenomena, a quantum phenomena. So let me briefly dwell on some of these things. So the Meissner effect, where in a normal state, magnetic field can enter a metal, whereas in the superconducting state, it's completely expelled. That's Meissner effect. And it's being used, for example, in magnetically levitated train. I was shocked to learn that in the experimental program in Japan, they could run this train at 2,000 kilometers per hour. Of course, the body will burn at that speed because of air friction. Sorry, there was some interruption. So the fastest trains are like 500 kilometers or so. So that's a remarkable application. When room temperature superconductivity comes, I'm sure the world will change. And then Josephson effect is a remarkable phenomena. You connect two superconductors by a weak link, some thin oxides, thin film of oxide. What do you expect? You expect some kind of maybe leakage current. What you find is there is a beautiful supercurrent that flows, which depends on so-called phase difference between two superconductors. So this graph shows current versus voltage. If you had an insulator, which also has a gap like a superconductor, you'll see a flat region, and then beyond the gap, it will shoot up. The current will go up. Whereas in superconductor, even for orbitally small voltage or zero voltage, there is a supercurrent, which is a Josephson current. It's not so the gap tells you about energy required to break an Cooper pair. Whereas the gaplessness comes from ability of Cooper pairs to move coherently without dissipation. That's why you see the Josephson phenomena. Even more exciting is the so-called AC Josephson effect. Again, something is missing in my picture. I'm sorry about it. I hope the future ones will be better. So there you apply a small voltage, you expect a DC current, but instead there is an AC current, which is determined by the voltage and fundamental constants like electric charge and Planck's constant. So that determines the principle of squid. So wonderful things happen. Now, when it comes to material, it all began in 1910 with Kamerlingh Mons, and people got excited. They found this superconductivity in lead, niobium nitride, A15 compounds, and slowly there was progress. And there were also progress in heavy fermions, silent progress at low temperatures. Then in 1986, there was a revolutionary development. Bednarz and Muller found superconductivity in copper oxide-based, lanthanum copper oxide-based material. And then it shot up in the next several months to nearly 100. So the cuprate branch holds a record of about 163 degree Kelvin in mercury-based compound, cuprate, and thallium-based compound. So it seemed to have saturated there, but there are good signals that if you massage cuprate, it could go even higher. There are competing instabilities which often bring down the transition temperatures. I will come to it later. So in this picture, you see there are many attempts to make new superconductors. One of the simplest and surprising superconductor is MgB2. It was all in the shelf of many people, and Akumitsu found superconductivity, nearly 40 Kelvin Tc, and then recently iron arsenide superconductors. But there are exciting developments in very recent time with hydrogen-rich material, because Wigner pointed out many years ago that if you take solid hydrogen and pressurize it, it will become a metal at high pressure. But it has not become a metal so far. But then theorists got excited, particularly Ashcraft, is that if you look carefully at that metal, because the phonon frequencies are very high, the TC will hit room temperature. So it started the game of hydrogen-rich materials. And we have now real temperatures reaching room temperature in hydrogen-rich material, so-called carbonaceous and sulfur material. I will come to it later. It's not far from Buffalo, Rochester Group, Ranga Dias and company, they have found this. So this is a new branch, which is very exciting. So we will discuss it a little bit later. So I'm going to talk about room temperature superconductors. So while some are stable, most are ephemeral, elusive, and unstable, and very notorious. Because these authors who write their papers are soon blamed. They said they don't know how to create junctions, they don't know how to create, interpret data, and so on, and they give up. So granularity, disorder, disconnectivity, nanoscale. I will try to point out that while there are fake signals, which are, which cheat, even well-minded experimentalists, but there are issues of nanoscale control and nonlinearity. I will come to it. So earlier people talked about metal ammonia solution, superconductivity, amorphous carbon, graphite, and so on. Recently, there has been remarkable progress. So like as I said, hydrogen-rich materials under very high pressure, stable superconductivity. And then this gold, silver nanostructures from indium substrate band. In fact, I will spend sizable amount of time in that. And then you shine light, infrared laser pulses, and then it becomes superconducting at room temperature, but it lasts very short time, 10 picoseconds. If only it can be pulled to several microseconds, it will be already wonderful. So these are all recent progress. And I'm going to focus on the middle one. So we are entering the world of superconductivity far from equilibrium, where there is, just to quote copy Feynman, I say that there is more room for room temperature superconductivity there. Now, the non-equilibrium phenomena I'm talking about is not the non-equilibrium phenomena people talk about with usual low temperature superconductors. For example, when you apply strong magnetic field, there is Abrikoso lattice of vortices, they can get pinned by impurities and they can get bound, and there may be flux bundles, there may be glassiness, and all kinds of beautiful nonlinearity, relaxation. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the very phenomenon of superconductivity, far from equilibrium. So before we proceed, so let me ask, what does theory say about possibility of room temperature superconductivity? Are there theoretical constraints? It's a very important question. In fact, there was a very important work by Marvin Cohen and Phil Anderson many years ago, that if you take phonon mechanism very seriously and consider the BCS theory and phonon mechanism very seriously and worry about stability of solid, the TC cannot exceed 30 Kelvin. That was a beautiful work by Anderson and Cohen. So you need to go for electronic mechanism if you want to hike up, and they didn't know there was no electronic mechanism. Even though people like Ginsberg and Boddy and others suggested exchange of excitons and possibility of high temperature, room temperature superconductivity and superconducting hydrogen-rich material. And I'm fascinated by RBB theory because it's the simplest possibility where superconductivity arises in one of the simplest strongly correlated system, namely a single band, a tight bending model in the presence of strong correlation. And there are many, many good experimental evidences and theory evidences for that. So on the whole, I will say that there is room for room temperature superconductivity within the available quantum mechanical constraint. So we are only not able to find the right system. So this is a picture. Again, part of this, something is missing. I wrote an article based on my long experience in superconductivity. It appeared in Pramana, a journal coming from Indian Academy of Sciences. You can download it. It's called Five-Fold Way to New Superconductors. So I have a picture, so I'll tell you a brief story. So I seem to bother my host whenever I visit a place. So I was visiting Fethi Madhuri, my former student. I was visiting him in Tunisia. I gave a series of lectures on superconductivity. The last lecture was on possibility of room temperature superconductivity. I told Fethi that if I come to Tunisia, you should take me to Sahara, because that's also as fascinating as Niagara in the winter. Vast desert, mysteries. So he took me to Niagara, and I was struck by the vastness and the beauty. And coming from Madras, that was sometimes in March, it was not too hot for me, maybe 42 degrees Celsius, but it was okay for me. So what did I do? I sat down and contemplated about high temperature superconductivity. That's a good place to think about it. So that's this picture. Okay. So already I have said this. So there's a very nice article by my friend Jakov Kopulovic from Brazil. He has been doing a lot of work on graphite superconductivity and variety of things. He has seen occasionally signals for room temperature superconductivity. He can't repeat it. And he has put it together in a very nice article called Unstable and Elusive Superconductors. So there are many, many instances. So I encourage people to look at it. Now, okay, let me start one of the early exciting developments. Even now, many people believe that there is truth in it and there are groups working hard on it. We are not able to reproduce it or see it once in 30 times or 50 times, because in spite of all the progress that we have, we are able to go to Moon, we are able to go to Jupiter, we have Voyager, but we have no nanoscopic control. That's what I tease my condensed matter friends. If only you can have nanoscopic control, there are ways of stabilizing room temperature superconductivity. You can have nanoscopic control with respect to a grain of crystal, but not at the level of a bulk or a micron size. I will come to it. So Richard Hogg, many of you may have heard a famous name, experimentalist from Stanford. He is well known for his suggesting that two electrons can form a pair and they can Bose-condense, and that could be the mechanism for superconductivity. He was way ahead of BCS theory. He was an experimentalist. What did he do? He put metal ammonia, he created what is called metal ammonia solution. Take liquid ammonia and the sodium and lithium easily dissolve. And what do? Once they dissolve, they break up. So you put the electron gets dissociated and you have a sodium ion and you have an electron solvated by ammonia molecules which carry dipole moment. So Hogg was working on it and he found very strange phenomena around 200 Kelvin. The current persisted for a long time. He observed very low resistance jump. And then he repeated, once in a while he saw it and he reported in Physical Review. And many others repeated it, and some people, particularly in UK and so on. Professor C.N. Rao at Bangalore has been deeply interested in it for a long time. So it's one of those elusive superconductors. But let's see, is it possible at all or is it meaningful at all from theory point of view? The answer is immediately no, because there are very good spectroscopic evidence that these electrons that are dissociated in metal ammonia solution, when you freeze it, it's called metal ammonia solid solution. Occasionally, two electrons bind together into a spin singlet. There are very good spectroscopic signature for this, and it's a very strong singlet. And when you do a very careful theory, you find sophisticated, density functional theory, correlation corrections. You find these electrons dig some tubes for them and form Cooper pair. It's like a Cooper pair tube. So what seems to happen is, at least that's what many theorists believe, that in this metal ammonia system, there are tenuous connections of fluids of Cooper pairs, which whenever they get connected, they have some macroscopic consequences like diamagnetism, persistent current, but often they fluctuate and break apart. So that was one of the early things. And there are very nice articles on Richard Hogg's work and later developments. And it's people shy away. Whenever I meet an experimentalist, ask them to do this because it's not an expensive system. So, and the theory is not ruling this out as a possibility. It's supporting that it's possible. So one should. There are many, many examples I will show. So he talks about Bose condensation. And there was a paper by Antoniewicz from Poland. He did measurements of some amorphous carbon. What did he see? He found oscillations that you happen in seeing squid. Fraunhofer pattern as a function of magnetic field. He could find the area and he could repeat it. Once in 100 times he saw it. So it got reported in Nature and then people forgot about it. Then similarly, there were excitements for a while, room temperature diamagnetism in copper, cuprous chloride, cadmium sulfide, and so on. And then occasionally you see graphite coming, particularly my friend Paolo Eskenazi and Kopelevich, they have done work together, and they keep seeing evidence for, these are all published papers, evidence for room temperature superconducting graphite interface, which are fluctuating. Sometimes you see, sometimes you don't see. There is another paper. Meissner, see, I will come to the Meissner signal versus resistance, because resistance can be cheated. There can be shortening of circuits and so on. Whereas with respect to Meissner effect, it's a bulk phenomena, and which is often very sensitive to external magnetic field. So there is no way of explaining it away. And then there is another recent paper. Okay, so it is in this background we will study in some detail this beautiful work, in my opinion, by Thapa and Pandey. They put this paper out in July 1918. The day I saw it, I called Pandey and invited him for an interview, because I got very excited, and I had already thought about it long back, but then forgot about it. This will come in the course of my lecture. So I got very excited. And what did they do? So Pandey is an experimentalist in the chemistry department. He is a specialist in nanoparticles. So he synthesizes nanoparticles and embeds them in some other matrix and studies a variety of wonderful properties. I do not know why. He was studying silver nanoparticles embedded in gold matrix. So Thapa was a student. After 2 years of effort, apparently, they managed to get this material. And we do not know it was accidental. They saw some very funny phenomena with respect to resistance and so on. So they immediately caught on to it. And they found out remarkable diamagnetism phenomena, which is fluctuating. You see once in 10 samples or once in 20 samples. And then electrical resistance falls below the lowest temperature that known at that temperatures, much lower than copper, gold at the room temperature. So it is a nanocrystal embedded in gold matrix. The dimensions of the nanocrystals are of the order of 10 nanometer. So very quickly, Arindam, professor at physics department, a remarkable and dynamic guy, he joined the team, and they are pushing this and trying to prove it right for the last 3 years. So I keep in touch with them. They're working very hard. Now they have been able to synthesize this in physics department, and they are fighting with the referees. And I wish them all the best. And it's a very, unlike the earlier happenings, here there is a teamwork. They have not given up in the last 3 years, and they see even more scope for progress. So when I gave a talk somewhere, I called it as silver lining for a golden era in the field of room temperature superconductivity. Okay. So they have put out 4 papers. Again, the thing that I pasted is missing. The archive references, coexistence of, that's the first paper, current voltage characteristics, unconventional optical response, observation of excess resistance. So let me show some of these pictures. So you see these pictures, the resistance doesn't go to 0, but it goes much lower than metal resistance of gold or silver. And there's a lot of fluctuations. And more importantly, as I said, there is a volume susceptibility, which is diamagnetic. So it falls down sharply, and it's very magnetic field dependent. So you can change it up and down. And they found noise which was much above experimental resolution. And Brian Skinner, a friend, immediately observed that there was 2 magnetic fields for which the noises were identical. So he was worried about the validity rate of the data. So he wrote a paper in the archive. My friends went back, and they found a very strange thing, that for some magnetic fields, the noises are reproducible, because they are noises not in the real sense, because it's some regular. So it looks like some funny shape memory effect at nanoscale, or quantum interference similar to conductance oscillation in mesoscopic system. We do not know. So they have not retracked their data. They have seen it in other places also. So it's there. So there is no understanding of this remarkable phenomenon. And if you look at the data, it's all over there. You look at this, you see cooling, heating, and different cycles. The place at which resistance falls down or Meissner effect takes place runs all over. So it's telling that some connectivity problem is happening, something is getting connected, and suddenly they fall apart. So what is going on? We do not understand. But the fact is there is Meissner effect. In fact, this is what I learned from Phil Anderson. Whenever we had this new superconductor, he never believed in resistivity data. I remember talking to him about some superconductivity organics. He said, Bhaskaran, don't look at resistivity. Let's look at Meissner effect and field dependence. He looked at it and he said, aha, this is real superconductivity. He said, no question about it. And it was proved to be true. So they have seen Meissner effect. And also, this is another very beautiful result in the last paper. What they see is the resistance maxima before the resistance plunges down. This is characteristic of nanograins of regular superconductors, where there are pi junctions and these fluxes, pi fluxes in nanowires and so on. So it looks almost like that. So it comforts them. So there is something like that going on. Then you look at this volume susceptibility, diamagnetism. It starts falling at 308 degree Kelvin. It's like room temperature at Chennai soon, because we'll hit 43 degrees Celsius very soon with high humidity. And then it damping drops and goes up and drops and so on. So what's going on? Okay. So now, assuming, giving a benefit of doubt that these are all real experiments and it's valid, assuming validity of experimental results, it's clear that we are entering the realm of far from equilibrium phenomena and leaving the comfort zone of equilibrium thermodynamic phases. What we seem to have is statistical superconductivity. That's the name I have coined, or probabilistic superconductivity. In some sense, it's beyond a glassy phase. There is physics still to be explored if the experiments are correct. And I always encourage people to repeat this experiment. Unfortunately, in the field of superconductivity, because of a lot of past history, people don't want to touch this sensitive area. Now, let me give some analogy how weird things can happen. We are all familiar, we saw ice in Niagara. People from New York and the northern part, and in Europe and in the southern part, well above the equator or below the equator, are familiar with snow. For me, each time I see snow, I get excited because it's totally new to me. So water and one form of ice have open structure, hydrogen bond and quantum dynamics of protein allow many structural reorganization, water wires. This is something amazing that if you take biological systems, waters organize into wires and they slide beautifully through big proteins, transmembrane proteins. And biological water has rich structure and variations, confining environment, presence of ions, etc. So water transport in plants is a very exciting field. Occasionally I look at it, how some of the tallest trees are in the US, the redwood trees, several tens of meters, 200 feet, 300 feet high. And the water gets transported up and they are beautifully pumped, through molecular pumps. And they are pulled by, like chains through the xylem, and amazing structural rearrangements take place there. Now, if you look at the phase diagram of water, you see up to about 10 gigapascal, several tens of phases. Now I want to view it as a statistical mechanics problem. Now, when I think about a schematic phase diagram, a schematic free energy diagram, I have a free energy and some general configuration coordinate, or you could call it order parameter. So if we take water at room temperature, the equilibrium state is water. Even there are lots of interesting things, there are small non-equilibrium phenomena there. But if you go up in free energy, there will be fluctuations even in ordinary water, which remembers that under some conditions, under some pressure, water will become ice 15 or ice 1H or ice 2 or ice or one of the 15 phases. So as one changes pressure, temperature, density, various minima comes down and become equilibrium phases. But this has profound consequences. So when a system is disturbed and pushed out of equilibrium, presence of multiple metastable phases renders many competing and far from equilibrium phases realizable often locally, phase separations, spinoidal decomposition. Many examples in biology, many examples in metallurgy, and many anomalies of liquid water. By the way, I recently saw this beautiful book, Snow Crystal by Ken Liebknecht. In fact, Ken was just finishing his PhD when I went to Princeton in '84. He's a professor at Caltech. He's working on very different problems. Gravitational waves, because he was a student of Bob Dickey and worked on gravitational problem. But I think he also works on Snow Crystal. He has a fascinating book. You can freely download it. It's from his website. He has an excellent website for snowflakes and snow crystals. So I strongly advise people to, if they're interested in ice, please have a look at this site. How, the physics of snowflakes and misunderstandings and understandings and so on. So, okay, having said all this, what kind of non-equilibrium phenomena could be present in gold-silver nanostructure that Pandey and company prepared? So it's like, like a goldsmith's job. So you have gold and you put some diamond in it, or here you put use. What kind of non-equilibrium will be there? And also, we know that pure silver and gold are not superconductors at all, down to the lowest temperature known in the lab. That's true for all monovalent metals except lithium. It's a minor exception because it has a half a millikelvin Tc. So when pure gold and pure silver are not superconducting, what's special about this matrix? You have, so it's supposed to have a nanoparticle of gold, 10 nanometer, or silver and embedded in gold. Why do you get superconductivity? There must be something wrong. So that's the feeling. That was not my feeling because I had some experience and I thought about it before. That's why I jumped into this. So now let's think about pure gold. So if you look at gold and silver, it's very special because we have a half-filled demand of s electrons. You can apply band theory, tide bending model very comfortably. And at low energy scales, you can show rigorously that Coulomb interaction becomes irrelevant. And you have a robust Fermi liquid, nearly no charge density, no spin density, or superconductivity. And the large Coulomb repulsion even renormalizes electron-phonon coupling constant because there is insufficient screening and make TC nearly vanish. That was the famous idea of Morrell and Anderson to explain why phonon-induced superconductivity is absent in monovalent metals. So a one-band Hubbard model at half filling describes low energy physics of all novel monovalent metals well. However, repulsive U gets renormalized to 0. So there is nothing exciting and interesting about gold at all, or silver. So all non-valent metals, lithium, sodium, potassium, rubidium, cesium, copper, silver, gold, look uninteresting from superconductivity point of view. How about metastable phases of room temperature superconductivity in silver and gold and other monovalent metals, like the way we saw ice? Ice has a very deep water minima. Then up in the sky, there are many, many metastable minima which can be stabilized by pressures and so on. So if there are such things, if present, there is opportunity to stabilize far from equilibrium superconductivity. I'm sorry, again, there is some mistake. Okay. Now, I worried about it and I did a theory. Sorry, that my PowerPoint in that there was a graph which is missing. I'm sorry, I will explain it because I don't want to go back and waste your time. So I wrote an article, theory of confined superconductivity in monovalent metal. My thesis was the following. Now I did various calculations, find that if you take copper or silver or gold and look at the free energy landscape, there is a deep minima which is a dear Fermi C. But up in the sky, there are many instabilities, charge density wave, extended S wave superconductivity, D wave superconductivity, Umklapp pair condensation, even ferromagnetism. So that was fascinating because nobody thought about it before. They should have thought about it because I will see why. And there was a beautiful paper by Morrell Cohen. In fact, I was familiar with it. And in fact, I visited Morrell in 1986 at Exxon, a very friendly person. We had extended discussion for a few days. So he looked at some anomaly, an optical anomaly called Meyer-Nabe resonance, a peak where you don't expect it in optical conductivity. And he did some theoretical work, and he said that, yes, at low energy scales, sodium is potassium is a metal. But if you go up in energy, these Fermi liquid quasi-particles interact very strongly. And there is even a tendency for them to form a pair. But this high energy pair, so they will occur as virtual fluctuations in the ground state. So they are up in the sky. So they are strong quantum fluctuations, high frequency phenomena, which is in the background. You don't see it in any low temperature phenomena or low frequency phenomena. He wrote a beautiful paper and he postulated and wrote a model. He says, how can I rationalize this? So what you see in this picture, something happened, things got displaced. So in the picture, there is order parameter in K space. If you take a standard superconductor, the order parameter will be non-zero around the Fermi momentum. Cohen argued that this order parameter is zero at the Fermi momentum, and it's positive on the left side, and above the Fermi momentum, it's negative. So he called it as odd K pairing. So it looked like a Fermi liquid for practical purposes, but there is deep pairing phenomena. And Overhauser, another great man. In fact, I visited him at Purdue many years ago. We had excellent discussion, and he told me, Bhaskaran, you should drop RVB theory. The most important thing is anomalies that many people see in sodium and potassium and many monovalent metals. He gave me his book, and also he showed me a list of 20 anomalies that he has been worried about. Also, as you all know, he's very obsessed with charge density and spin density wave, fluctuating charge and spin density wave in sodium and potassium metal. And he has written a book, monograph, Anomalies in Simple Metals. So people have worried about anomalies in three-dimensional metal, but they are happening at high energy scale. Who cares about it? Because we are hardly interested to 500 Kelvin, maybe 50 MeV. But if something is happening at 500 MeV, how can I see it in the lab experiment? That's where low dimensionality comes to the rescue. So I realized that low dimensionality can help bring hidden hot superconductivity and from the depths of the Fermi sea that I pointed out in my first paper. Let me elaborate. So in the theoretical world, Mott insulators and doped Mott insulators are playgrounds for local pairing at very high superconductivity. Like you see local superconductivity at 300 Kelvin in cuprate. There are very good evidence from light pumped superconductivity and ZAP measurement, STM, and so on. Now, this is in cuprate. But what is happening is, if you take the same silver or gold and make a wire of silver or a plane of silver, physics becomes completely different. Coulomb interaction, which was sleeping, wakes up. And it brings the physics close to Mott insulator. That's what I will show in the next one. So this is something that you're all familiar with. Suppose you take this Mott's argument. Suppose you take sodium metal and keep them very close so that the distance between two atoms is close to Bohr radius. The wave function is overlap. You'll have a beautiful half-filled band. Suppose you have do a thought experiment in which you expand sodium metal. Then when the lattice parameter becomes larger than Bohr radius, electrons won't like to form a narrow band because they tunnel and form a narrow band, but they lose a lot of Coulomb repulsion energy. So they will stay home and do singlet pairing through super exchange and so on. That's the content of Mott insulator and RVB physics. Now, what I knew and many people knew was that something very strange happens with respect to, for example, silver or gold wire. Suppose I take a silver or gold wire and describe it by a Hubbard model and solve it. Lieb and Wu, my friend Lieb, has solved it exactly for us and put the numbers 11 for silver or copper. You find that silver chain or gold chain, because of lower dimensionality, always remains Mott insulating, which also says that there is a lot of super exchange physics. There is a lot of singlet pairing. And then if you estimate the singlet exchange coupling J, it is like 1.5 electron volt, embarrassingly high, 10 times higher than cuprate. That means silver or gold, if you can prepare them in good lower dimensional form, they will support a lot of RVB physics. But unfortunately, this two-dimensional silver or gold is never stable. They undergo crumping and all kinds of structural instability. Now, I'll point out that Thapa and Pandey are getting this silver and gold in local patches in a convenient way. Okay, so this is a message from RVB theory. So now let me summarize what I did. So, okay, three-dimensional silver and gold, there is no way of getting room temperature superconductivity. Let me take the same parameter that my friends use for understanding silver and gold and consider an ideal chain of silver or gold. Put equilibrium distance, a comfortable distance. What I find is a Mott-Hubbard gap of 1 electron volt and an antiferromagnetic exchange of 1.5 electron volt. So that means an ideal silver and silver chain are in an RVB state with local pairing temperature and pairing gap, scale of several hundred millielectron, much higher than cuprates. Similarly, if I take a cluster of silver or gold atoms, which already results are available, support RVB states and singlet resonance until some critical size. When you take more than 50, 20 atoms together and form, they start behaving like a filled shell and metal. So there is something special about lower dimensionality and nanoscopic structure where correlations come up and change the physics. This is well known, for example, when you think about wave phenomena is very different in different dimensions. If you take quantum mechanical wave, when you think about Anderson localization, in 3 dimension, you need a critical strength of disorder to localize all the states in a band, for example. Whereas in 1 and 2 dimension, arbitrarily small disorder will localize. Similarly, if you think about random walk, which is closely related to wave phenomena, because they are generating functions of random walks or Green's function, what you find is a remarkable result. In 1 dimension, the random walker will always come back to his home asymptotically with probability 1. So will he do it in 2 dimension. In 3 dimension, with some finite probability, he will come back. Whereas in 4 and above, he will never come back. So the connectivity and space is very different. So wave phenomena can be extremely different. So basically what happens is the Coulomb repulsion, which became irrelevant in 3 dimension because electrons scatter and run away, they never meet again. In 1 and 2 dimension, they meet repeatedly and the repulsion gets piled up into remarkable Mott-Hubbard gap. Okay, so having said that, so what I did was, I did a very small calculation, used existing result. I took an array of weakly coupled silver chains and brought them together theoretically and calculated the best available numerics and various things, what will be the local superconducting transition temperatures. So for comfortable hopping, I get embarrassingly high TC. But this is why people have not discovered it so far, because people have prepared monolayers of gold and silver. In reality, when you make this system, lattice dimerization, charge orders and spin orders kill, they compete. They leave some local super. These are very good, we have good experience of this in cuprate because there are family of cuprates. If you look at the normal state, you can't distinguish between them. Whereas if you look at TC, they swing from 5 to 160 Kelvin. What is the reason? The reason is competing orders like charge order, spin order, stripe order, which tend to distort the octahedron, localize charges, and allow Cooper pairs to not to escape and delocalize, go into coherent state. So in reality, this is a big challenge. So we don't see room superconductivity as a day-to-day phenomena. So we need some special care. So what did I do? I went to the picture that Thapa and Pandey and collaborators have given. This is a TEM picture. This is supposed to be a boundary of silver nanoparticle with gold. What you see is beautiful layers characteristic of an FCC lattice, ABC, ABC. And occasionally you find stacking faults. And occasionally you see clusters. And you see lots of inhomogeneity. So now I estimated the number of things available. Unfortunately for me, there was a nice theoretical work in the context of lithium available by some group. So they had studied experiments on MD simulation of nanoparticle. What you find is, because of kinetic barriers and so on, you never get a perfect single crystal. You have lots of stacking faults and lots of clusters and so on. So I estimated that I found that similar things happen in Thapa and Pandey. So, okay. So this is what I find by my analysis. So I find line dislocation, stacking faults, inclusion of nanoparticles, patches out in Thapa Pandey's. So what did I do? I hypothesized that clusters of size 10 of atoms, line dislocations and inclusion, they are potential RBB spring for singlet reservoir. Because theory tells me and experiments tells me that if I have isolated clusters or isolated chain, they definitely have very strong above room temperature local TC. But they cannot support long range phase order for various reasons. And when you put them inside a metal, like suppose I insert a chain of gold atom in a 3-dimensional FCC lattice, I can insert it. They are very strongly hybridized to the background Fermi C. So the gold will lose its individuality in terms of electronic property, even though structurally it's a chain, because a hopping matrix element is too large. So any local pairing tendency will be killed. Okay, so this is well known. Then I remembered a beautiful phenomena called many-body localization. So this is what I will describe next. So this is a very important development in many-body physics in the last 1 or 2 decades. It was actually started by Phil Anderson in his famous 1958 paper. In fact, he wanted to develop a theory for many-body localization because he was excited about NMR relaxations. The NMR spins did not relax even though they were interacting through long-range dipole interactions and so on. So he did a simple model calculation and got away with it and got Nobel Prize. I always make fun of. So he did a model problem, did it very well. That's Anderson localization paper. So Anderson localization, a well-known one electron wave phenomena by disorder. But many particle states of interacting spins systems, example, spins and so on, can get trapped in its home via destructive interference in multi-particle Hilbert space. This is a very active field now. People have done cold atom experiments. So you expect some states, you prepare them, you expect them to thermalize. They don't thermalize. They stay put there. In fact, some of those states are called many-body scar states. And similarly, in the presence of disorder, the system which you expect to thermalize fast doesn't thermalize. It stays. There is destructive interference in multi-particle Hilbert space. So this is what I found is happening here. That's my conjecture. That is, you have gold and you have silver, beautiful Fermi C. They are very robust. There is no possibility of instabilities, but there are local structural disorder. 100 atoms, 200 atoms, 10 atoms. They support strong local RBB physics, or springs of RBB, but many of them will disappear. But however, in the presence of disorder and some doping, some of them could survive. So this is a picture I have developed in my papers, that what you have is, you have a Fermi C of non-superconducting material. And by the way preparation, like you can see from the TEM picture, transmission electron microscopy picture, there are definitely very sharp local homogeneity. You may ask, why don't you do this with alloys, like some silver gold alloy or something? Yes, well, if you do it carefully, it is likely to be there. So people, so Thapa and Pandey and Anindam and so on, for very different reasons, they have been studying this. But in my opinion, they are unintentionally creating local springs of RBB or singlet resources, where they are strongly coupled to the electronic environment, but many-body localization and quantum entanglement keeps them. So in my paper, I have tried to build a model where it can be approximately implemented. So the messages, I'm coming to the close end of my talk, messages that a web of RBB spring gets Josephson coupled via proximity effect. This is again a well-known phenomenon that people have done beautiful experiments. You take a piece of niobium, another piece of niobium, put gold in between. There is so-called anomalous proximity effect, more than what theory predicts, through gold and many monovalent metals. So in other words, gold is longing to become a superconductor because it's one of its instability. So given a chance, it nurtures it and propagates it to the other end. So there are anomalous proximity effects with respect to gold and silver. So they happily, once there is an RBB spring, they can connect them through proximity effect. So what you have is some kind of Josephson coupled network of. So you can develop a theory using node, and then you get TC, which is similar to what you see. So this is the model of random network, Joseph network. This is my rationalization of this beautiful phenomena. But of course, I always, when I meet my friends, I tell them, and I gave a colloquium at Bangalore, I told them that, see, their experiments may turn out to be wrong, but my theory can't be wrong. So of course, they laugh. So I think that I'm coming to the end. Now, there are lots of, interestingly, there is an Indian spirit behind. Only Indians have done experiments to, go for the, like my friend Yadav and Ashwant Balakrishnan, IIT Mandi, they have taken silver gold film and they have prepared nanostructures in a different way. And they do see once in 20 samples, electrical zero resolution at 200 kelvins and so on. They have put it in the archive. Now they need money to push it further. Now, another friend, Satish Ogale from IISER Pune, he's a laser ablation guy. He created the nanostructures, but I tell him that laser ablation is too harsh. So he kill all these RBB springs. So he reports that there is no superconductivity. Then there is theory papers. Like LBK Prasad from IIT Kanpur talking about possibilities, and this group from BARC, Debanjan Karmakar, and another paper. And then let me go back. I had one day. There was see, I had a beautiful picture here. Let me explain what was there. I think there is some problem with. So here I had a PowerPoint presentation from a group work from NICER, National Institute for Education, Science and Education Research at Bhubaneswar. Their colleague had done this experiment with silver and gold, and they don't see high temperature, but they see superconducting 2 Kelvin. But I tell them 2 Kelvin is like infinity compared to 0, because silver is not superconducting, gold is not superconducting. You get 2 Kelvin, that's already amazing. There's no alloy of silver and gold superconducting. So they are pursuing the work. So I missed it. So a lot of, I wish more people follow it up, because from theory point of view, I won't be surprised that it will be, if it is turned out to be true. So now since Surjit, how much time do I have? I'm taking too much liberty.
Let's say about 4 or 5 minutes. Yeah, your picture is coming through, I think, for some reason.
Yeah. So I told about 2 systems. It's amazing, because I always tell that supervisors tell that under pressures, every student works. So it seems that under pressure, even room temperature superconductivity is possible. It all started with Ehrmann, who found silane, SiH4 under pressure became superconductor, 17 Kelvin. Then he pressurized to H2S and they decomposed, and then it exhibited TC 200 Kelvin at huge pressure, 200 gigapascal. Pressure at the core of our Earth is 300 gigapascal. But it's a semi-equilibrium, I will say, because they apply pressure over a short time. So things are not equilibrated. There are kinetic barriers, so they do see hysteresis. So it's not the non-equilibrium superconductivity that I'm talking about. It's still, there is a lot of non-equilibrium physics here and a lot of things to be done. And then Eramet's group found in this beautiful system, lanthanum decahydride, LaH10, superconducting 250 Kelvin at similar pressure range. Then not far from Buffalo is Rochester, Ranga Dias, a young assistant professor. He worked at Harvard, Silvera's group. He metallized hydrogen, and they have managed, using some non-equilibrium processes, they take methane and H2S, put them together, shine it with laser, burn it, and apply pressure. They get room temperature superconducting, 288 Kelvin, definitely at room temperature. So it's very exciting time. So there is a lot of non-equilibrium physics, but again, I have put a paper there in the archive, because hydrogen subsystem is very special, and there is a lot of hidden Mott physics. I have brought it out, and of course, the prevalent theory is phonon mechanism, but there are lots of loopholes. We have no time to go into it. So there is a paper in the archive. Then let me complete in the next 1 minute with this fascinating work by Andrea Cavalieri and group. In fact, I visited his lab and gave a colloquium. It's very exciting. What they did was they took IPCO, which is at room temperatures, 300 Kelvin, and shine femtosecond lasers, 20 terahertz radiation or 80 MeV, and look at the response. They look at real part of conductivity. It has a response that of a superconductor, but it lasts for only 10 picoseconds. Who cares? But then, I always tell them, don't give up, because Wright brothers, the first flight was 59 seconds precisely. That was in 1903. Now Voyager, which was sent by NASA in the late 90s, it has been going for the last 40 years. It has crossed our solar system, and it's going, and it's even now sending signals. The signals take 5 hours to reach us. So billion miles away. So 10 minutes is a good beginning, the 10 picoseconds. Who knows? They will reach milliseconds and so on. So there is a lot of scope for non-equilibrium superconductivity. As I said, I will say that there is more room in the world of non-equilibrium for superconductivity. Let me complete with so I have a paper about it. So it's a fun paper. My supervisor was interested in biology, Narendra Kumar. So on his 60th birthday, I wrote a paper. It's all basic condensed matter phenomena and notions mirror in biology, a hypothesis. So I argued and looked carefully at phenomena like quantum magnetism in ferritin, and the quantum coherence in exciton transfer and exciton condensation, photosynthesis. So biology in the warm, wet environment at some nanoscales have very rich quantum physics, but it's not clear that they hold hands and determine our life. But they are going definitely in isolation. So the world is very rich, and let me end my talk there. Thank you for your attention. I'll be very happy to answer questions. Thank you, Surjit. So
fantastic. You're open for questions, and you feel free to ask questions too.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
Beautiful talk. I remember your talk which you gave on that Kumar's 60th. I remember that one. Anyway, I have a very simple question. If you why only say silver? If I take a silver matrix and put gold nanoparticles, you should see, according to you, should see phenomena like that.
Exactly. So in fact, I am telling them that please don't go rich. Take copper and put it in. So potassium, you will see it. Because for me, so it's in fact in my second paper I have elaborated. What is important is this monovalent metal, and things like potassium and sodium are very reactive, whereas the coinage metal, copper, silver, and gold. And incidentally, thank you, Mohanty.
Another question I have: if I understand, your superconductivity is in the interface region, and
yes,
then
we are in clusters and interfaces in nanoscales.
Okay.
And many of them don't survive. Some of them survive. And Banu, since you mentioned this, people have seen anomalous diamagnetism in copper. It's a well-known phenomenon. In fact, my friend, the late Joe Imrie, worked hard on it, and he said, none of my nanoschool physics can explain it. It's a many-body phenomenon. So copper diamagnetism is well-known. It was discovered in 1935. Similarly, gold nanorods become room temperature ferromagnet, reproducible. So strong correlation physics is there in these systems, waiting to come out. So you prepare room for them. Maybe they will come out. That's my message. It's easy to say, but it's difficult for an experimentalist to.
I agree. Yeah, good. Yeah. But beautiful talk.
Thank you.
Other questions? We have some.
Sorry, I may have rushed very fast.
Oh, no. Some of your pictures were causing problems, but that's okay. You kind of explained very nicely. So it was a great talk.
So my request is for experimental colleagues to take some of this as a side project. You may be doing deterministic physics, but there is a rich world there, and there have been signals since 1935. Most of it has been ignored, but I can't ignore silver and gold. And because at least my simple-minded theory tells me that it's not impossible. So I would like to see somebody doing some nanoscale experiments, like Banu said, do the other way, become, putting gold in silver matrix is definitely cheaper, or putting silver in copper is even cheaper.
Yeah.
So for me, any monovalent metal will do, and there are beautiful possibilities. Now, as I'm talking to you, I see a friend of mine, Vikram Soni, in the screen. Vikram worries about superfluidity in neutron stars. They're at super high temperatures. So our room temperature is much smaller than their temperature in magnetars and neutron stars.
Yes, Oris.
Yes.
So if there are experimentalists, I will encourage them to go back to some of those failed superconductors or elusive superconductors. And there is definitely, a lot of opportunities there. In fact, I'm very happy to say that the Bangalore group have enthused and convinced some good groups outside. They have started looking at it.
Bhaskaran, there's a question from Oris Simcoe from Utah.
Yeah,
thank you very much for a nice talk. Wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
I have a question regarding what's your feeling about induced superconductivity? It's been shown that gold can be superconducting at very low temperatures by inducing superconductivity. So couldn't you work around that way somehow for room temperature?
No, you can induce superconductivity in gold via proximity effect.
Right.
As I said, like putting niobium, then the superconductivity will be controlled by the TC of niobium. So if you had some other room temperature superconductor, hello, it's okay. It's okay.
I can mute him. Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, my grandson occasionally peeps in, and so it's all part of the.
No, I muted you. Okay, now you're fine, Oris. No problem.
Oh, sorry about that.
No problem.
So I was, gold has a very strong tendency to, so as I said, people have already seen anomalous proximity effect in gold and silver, because you don't expect Cooper pair to travel that much distance in any other metal. Here, they travel happily for a long distance and create Josephson coupling between two superconductors. So there is something special about superconductor, silver and gold. They can be induced superconductivity. But whether you can induce them to room temperature scale depends on who induces it. If there is already a room temperature superconductor. But what all I'm saying is the very silver or gold at nanoscale is a spring of room temperature superconductivity, but very fragile. It can dissolve in the harsh Fermi sea. Under some condition, it can hold by many body localization. So it's amazing. All the recent ideas are coming together and telling us, that physics is richer than what we think.
Can I ask a question? Right, that your TC is set by this entanglement?
Exactly. So the TC is a measure of resonating valence bond character within that cluster, which can be quantified in terms of the scale J. Okay. The super exchange, J said, is like a factor of 10 more than cuprate. So embarrassingly high. Okay,
I see.
So there is a lot of room for creating nanoscale superconductivity, clusters. I plead with my experimenters, please create clusters and make local charge measurements. You will see charge 2e fluctuations, because if there is a pairing tendency, and if there is local Cooper pairing, and then it will act like a Cooper pair box, and there will be charge 2e fluctuations. Already they have seen it in graphene quantum dots. Beautiful electrochemistry experiments do reveal presence of charge 2e objects in graphene, because graphene is a very old RGB system, thanks to Pauling. It's old work. So at nanoscales, things are good. But when you come to, beyond mesoscale, things go back to the good old Fermi sea or Dirac sea. So you have to work hard to create it. That's my message.
Yeah, what survives is important, right?
Yeah, right. But I think Thapa Pandey's work is a demonstration that it could survive. But as I say, they have in the, I think, fourth paper also, they have put a table out of 200 samples, you see 12 samples, and they have prepare a sample, go to the next room, it doesn't superconduct. So there's so much uncertainty and fluctuations. Now things are apparently improving. I was talking to both Arindam and so I think these are all challenging directions which people should take. There, equilibrium physics is comfortable, definitely.
Yeah.
One should not put a PhD students in it, but I have not put any of my former students into this.
I was going to suggest, Bhaskaran, you mentioned many of your papers that you have placed in the archive in recent years, but it would be very nice if you actually do a sort of informal review maybe good for non-specialists to really kind of dig into this.
Sure, yeah. No, in fact, there is a story behind this archive. See, it's like making a virtue out of vice. See, long back, Phil Anderson and myself, we were discussing. We wrote a paper, we sent it to the archive. So Phil said in one of those moments, Bhaskaran, why do we send it to journals? Because often referees don't understand what we are talking. Because in fact, Anderson's papers always have tough time with the referees. There are many, many examples. So he said, why don't we leave it in the archive? So I agreed with him. So I'm sincerely following it. I'm a lazy guy because I'm afraid to face the referees. Each time I send a physical review or physical regulators, I get referees report. In fact, my friend Muthukumar from Amherst always tells me, Bhaskaran, it's your mistake. Treat your referee as a long distance collaborator and take his comment seriously and answer them. So I don't have that much patience.
I hear you. Yeah, I think that's a story for all of us.
So,
but yeah,
so most of my papers are in the archive. It's for but of course, some good friends know about it. Most of the world doesn't know it. But anyway, that's the way it is. But you are right. Thank you. I will. Yeah. I think I put these things together in some form so that experimental colleagues can take it seriously.
Yeah, in International Journal of Modern Physics, they're always looking for good quality reviews.
Okay, I see.
And if you do one, I'd be happy to have it recommended, because I've been sitting in the board for a long time, and they always tell us to get good reviews.
Okay, thank you.
So, yeah, that'll be terrific, because the topic you touched upon, or the range of topics you touched upon, they're very complex. And the fact
yeah, I agree with you. Bringing back Mayer-Elnabi anomaly and Morrell-Cohen 64 paper, connecting now with the disordered localization. Anybody says a beautiful theme. I think it will be a nice review article, Bhaskaran.
Yeah, I really do. And someone like me who is interested, who has worked on it 30 years ago on similar problems, but have really not kept in touch with the field, can really kind of dig into it in a way that is a lot of fun, and it can also enable cross-fertilization of ideas that I think is terribly important in the present time.
Good.
Yeah, thank you. No, I think I will definitely
more work for him. Okay.
I know, but he has already written most of it.
But I tell friends that I have this joke. So I have become a confined quasi-particle. We all have become confined quasi-particle, but physics keeps us colorful.
Yeah. Yes.
Like quarks. Quarks are confined; they are colorful. Then a friend of mine, said, "Oh, we are all looking for asymptotic freedom," and so on.
Maybe that's when we die.
Well,
oh no!
No, it's we enter a different world.
Yeah.
Where everything is superconducting and
totally, yeah.
Smooth, no resistance.
Thank you very much. That was good, really.
Thank you, Bhaskaran, and thank you, everyone. This has been a fantastic morning here and night for you. And
so, greetings to all friends from from different parts. I could not personally say hello to you. So, thanks to Surjit once again for arranging this.
You're very welcome. This is so much fun. Thank you, and we'll do another one in a couple of weeks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.